name is Alicia Curran, and I am the mom of a 20-year-old with autism. So I've dedicated my entire career and currently work at the University of Missouri as the Director of Operations for our ECHO Autism program.
I'm Jenn McNaught. I have two boys. One has sensory processing disorder, which looks very similar to autism, and my other son is on the spectrum and also has ADHD and OCD. I am also a working mom. I own my own business. It's an advertising agency.
So our days start usually early in the morning, sometimes not, but usually early in the morning. And Sam is very routine oriented in that before he does anything, he has to start the shower. So that means that if he gets up at 1 or 2 a.m., he wants to take a shower. So that can be a frustrating process when I'm really tired, but it can also be pretty funny if I'm going to be honest. He's so focused on getting that shower on and getting in the shower that I've had to really get creative, like take off the shower nozzle so he can't get in the shower. But I will say over time, we've established that if it's not time to take a shower, he understands that. And now I can coax him to go back to bed and sleep for a few more hours. So all too often, that's how my day starts. But other times he wakes up on time and it's always a busy morning. You know, we just kind of work out a little thing. He knows all the things that he needs to do. He executes some of them beautifully, totally independently, and then he knows when to ask for help. There are some things that I'm still in charge of, like teeth. I'm really, we don't need cavities. I can't imagine filling a cavity for Sam. So there are some things that I take over, but I will say it's not easy to do, but it's so important for parents is to challenge them to be as independent as possible, because when they're little, it's one thing, but when they grow up to be 20, like Sam, and I'm trying to get ready, and now I have a job, I don't stay home with them anymore, it can be really burdensome for me. And then that leads to frustration, which frustrates him and frustrates the other other members of the household. So, I think that's one of the key takeaways is to certainly empower them and challenge kids, even if you don't think they are able to accomplish something, challenge them, because I will tell you, in my experience, Sam surprises me every single day.
I'm going to interject there. I want to say, I love what you said about challenging them. My kids need less support than Sam does, but we've had to build on things. And so I remember when they were, 3 and 5, we started with, I'm holding their hand on the toothbrush with their hand, showing them how to do the little circles. And where I think with a neurotypical child, that might have only taken 5 or 10 times. With my children, it took 12 to 18 months. When they were really little, they wanted to drink the toothpaste and they were jumping all around and there was toothpaste everywhere and it was a struggle. And if I'm with toothpaste in my hair and it's a 45-minute process, and are they ever going to get to bed? We've come a really long way from that now, but it's because we challenge them. I do totally agree with challenging them and teaching them one step at a time to get just a little bit more advanced on what it is that they can learn to do and be comfortable doing. And I think that carries no matter what level of support that the child on the spectrum needs.
You're exactly right, Jen. And I think that's a key highlight that is imperative for everyone to understand. It doesn't really matter where you land on the spectrum, if you are verbal, if you're minimally verbal, if you're nonverbal, what level of support you need to be successful through the day. There are difficulties throughout everyone's journey. And I hear that a lot from parents that, they think that, oh, if only my child was verbal, if only my child was more independent, if only. But in my experience, I have worked with families a long time. I've been very active in the autism community for the last 20 years. I've heard tons of stories. I've had lots of experience myself. And I will tell you that it's not less difficult. No journey is really less difficult. It's just a different set of issues.
You're right. And I think that I feel bad. I feel almost like inadequate, or like I can't claim being an autism mom because I don't have some of the same struggles that you have. I will say this, my 12-year-old has gotten physical with me, and we have had that. But we've also worked through it, and it's getting better. And I know the trajectory that he's on. I don't think that when he's 20 that I will have to physically remove him with help from the grocery store that I know you've told me you've had to deal with, with Sam, and that you'll probably always be dealing with. So I feel like I can't claim that. Like I can't be like, oh yeah, my kids have autism, because if you met my kids right now, the average person who would meet my kids would think, oh, they're neurotypical. They're maybe a little eccentric. They talk a lot. Maybe they flap their arms or they stim themselves a little bit, but they seem neurotypical. And so I feel in your presence, or a mom who has a lot more support needed for their child, like I don't have any room to even say anything, because my kids are easier, I feel like, physically at least, and they're verbal, than what you're dealing with Sam. So I feel like I just need to be quiet and count my blessings and just be glad that, like, at least they're verbal, and at least I'm not having to drag them out of the store, and they're not bigger than me, and they're usually not punching me. And so I feel like I don't have any room to talk. And so that's kind of why we're having this conversation too, is because the truth is, behind the scenes, that's not really what it looks like. But people don't know that unless they're in my inner circle. And I don't always want to bring people into that, because it can be scary, and it can be messy, and it can be difficult and dangerous sometimes. But at the same time, I don't know that I still feel confident or like rightfully sharing the same space as you, Alicia, who has a child who needs so much more support and for life.
And I don't think you should ever feel that way, because again, an autism journey is different for every single family, every single person. Sam really displays autism, so people see him coming, and they excuse so much that they don't with your children who might appear neurotypical. And I think certainly in his adult years, he definitely has an advantage, because no matter what happens to me or my husband, or our family members, he's always going to have that support from state and federal systems, because of the level of need of support that he has. So he's at a total advantage, where I think sometimes when those kids who don't always present that they have autism are at a total disadvantage, because people are expecting this. And some days, yeah, they hit the mark, but for the days they don't, it's really, really difficult.
With your kids, at least for me, one of the most important things is setting expectations, especially with kids on the spectrum, setting expectations. We're going into Toys R Us, we're buying a toy for your friend's birthday party, then we're going home. We're not buying anything else. And saying that before we get in the car, saying that in the car several times, discussing it, having them repeat it back to me, making sure that they understand it, saying it as we're getting out of the car, saying it as we're going into the store, saying it as we're getting the toy off the shelf for the friend. And still, my son, in this one instance that I can recall, had this entire huge meltdown in the middle of the store, kicking and screaming because he wasn't getting a toy from Toys R Us. And it's like, well, we discussed this, we talked about this. So in this case, I'm in public, I'm remaining calm, thank goodness in that case, and I'm telling him quietly, we talked about this. This is what we discussed. We're getting a toy for your friend. Today, we're not getting a toy for you. He's escalating and escalating. He's at a 10. I'm trying to de-escalate. He's just escalating and escalating. In that moment, I promise you, many parents in the store were judging me, right? They don't realize I spent 2 hours preparing for this moment, and that this is something we had to go through. It was a learning thing for him, and it's part of his autism.
What's so funny is all the steps you took as you were going to Toys R Us, getting into Toys R Us, during Toys R Us, the fit that happened in Toys R Us, that has like I've done the same exact in that order, exactly what you described. The only thing that was different, and here our kids are on totally opposite ends of the spectrum, yet the same story. I can tell the same story. Again, that is a great highlight that shows here we are, different ends and of the spectrum, and it's the same. It's obvious that Sam has autism, so I do think that that helps me become an open book, because it is what it is. I can't I really don't have to explain. It's actually an advantage. I don't have to explain what's up with Sam, because how he displays and exhibits those autism symptoms tell the story for me.
Yeah, and I will say, when I got my kids both diagnosed, and sensory processing disorder is different than autism, but again, I think that it exhibits similar symptoms. I actually feel like my hands are tied. I can't introduce my kids as, this is Mason, he has autism, this is Tyler, he has sensory processing disorder, because it crushes them. They don't want to hear what's wrong with them. They don't want to hear what their differences are. They don't want to be introduced like that, which does put me again squarely in that judge category when I go out in public, but I'm just willing to take it. I'll take it. Judge me at the park, judge me at the grocery store, but I'm not going to crush my child.
Yeah, no, I so agree with you. And I would say that, Sam doesn't have a lot of language, but he understands everything. And that is one of the largest mistakes that I've made as a parent, is just saying it because I didn't think that he understood. He understood everything. And when I started working in the school district with all kinds of kids with different abilities, I will tell you, the ones that were verbal, the ones that may not be so verbal, every single one of them understood exactly what was going on. And they also can interpret your reactions and your actions and your feelings and your emotions. I get you. Sam makes that available from the get-go, but if he were not to exhibit those symptoms quite so, it doesn't matter. Wouldn't it be wonderful, Jen, if we lived in a world where you didn't ever have to explain, because everybody was accepting of different ways that we live and grow? To me, going in a restaurant and not being able to apologize when Sam runs over and drinks somebody's drink or eats their chicken nuggets, yes, true story. Me not having to feel horrified about that ever, boy, that would allow me to live my best life.
I think a world that we're really all striving for in 2021, I'm hearing it a lot, a world enveloped in kindness, devoid of judgment, is really what we're looking for. Don't judge me as a bad mom. Just know that my child is different than yours maybe, and that's okay. That's where we're at. Honestly, we've come a really long way. I'll tell you, my oldest for a year would only wear garbage bags as clothes. And I had to accept that. And that was really difficult. And I did. We turned it into a whole thing. There was a cape. It was a whole thing. And I know there were people, I'm sure, probably everybody that saw us was like, oh my gosh, she is the worst mom in the whole entire world. Actually, I was being a good mom. He needed to do that, and I needed to help him through that, and we got through it. And now he actually laughs about it now, but it was something that he needed to go through. Let's not judge each other. Let's use kindness. If we see someone who's doing something that's not typical, let's recognize that that person is on a journey and that they are working through something, and let's help them, and let's be kind and loving and accepting, because it's 2021. It's time to be kind, loving, and accepting to all types of people.
I felt the same way, Jen. I've had a woman come up and tell me that all my son needs is a good spanking, and he wouldn't act that way. And so she did not take my child home like I offered. because I told her, you know, I didn't realize that, but how about you take him home and give him that good spanking, and then when he doesn't do these things, you can bring him back to me. I'll give you our address. She didn't take him home that day. But you know, I had to turn that around and just find humor in it because it was so horrifying. And I think that's been a strategy that I've always used, is you've got to find humor in some things. As Sam has gone through the teenage years and puberty, and you know, embarking on this new unknown, which is adulthood, I do find it more difficult to find the humor and all these things. But at the end of the day, you have to find humor, because if you don't, it's just sometimes becomes unbearable.
We decided to use the resources that I have, which I've read every book. We have a lot of also therapeutic resources that we use here in our home, and a lot of other things that we do together to try and help support him. And so over the years, he has checked back in with me, because we don't talk about that label very often at home. And so he has checked back in with me even recently, probably once a year. He's 12 now. And he's like, do I still have that? Am I still? And recently I said to him, you know, you've come a really long way. We've worked on a lot of things. You are doing great. And that's it. We just sit with that. And so we don't use a lot of labels at home.
For us, it's like completely the opposite, because I think it gives him a reason for some of the things that he does that he doesn't want to do but can't help because of his autism. So, for example, well, first of all, I didn't really think I needed to tell him. I don't know why, because again, I took advantage of the fact that he didn't have a lot of verbal abilities and he wouldn't understand. That was totally a misconception, for one of the regrets I have, and have definitely learned from that. So we didn't tell Sam until he got older. And I think it made a lot of sense to him. I think he had a lot of questions of like, why do I do this when I know it's not right and I just can't help myself and I just do it? Like, I think he was frustrated and trying to figure out why he was doing the things that he was doing. And so we use it actually a lot now, especially if he has a huge tantrum. Sam is, 250 pounds, 6 foot tall, and highly aggressive due to some of the co-occurring psychiatric conditions that he has, and just that irritability that comes with kind of the package deal in some kids. And when he is having one of those episodes and trying to calm him down, you know, I try to give him the reason. It's not because he's a bad kid. It's not because he is just out of control. It's called autism. And, you know, this is the reason why you're that way, but let's calm down. I believe in you. You have the ability to bring yourself back down and, do the right things. And so that's we've used that a lot, but I will say one of the biggest regrets is me certainly not telling him earlier on, because I'm 1,000% positive he would have understood, and maybe that would have allowed him to work through some of that frustration. The experiences we have as parents and the journey determines how we handle things, the strategies we use, and no one journey is alike.